Welcome, everyone, to Inform New Hampshire. My name is Dean, and this is my co-host Richie to my right. We have a guest on today, Bill McNally. We'll get to him in just a minute. We are Inform New Hampshire. We have a YouTube channel as well as a Facebook page. Happy for you to stop by there and like us or friend us. And Richie and I are we have been co-coordinators for, co-state coordinators for National Liberty Alliance. I'll let Richie talk about that in a little bit. We believe our country is in deep peril, and we're here to provide you with news and information that you won't get from the mainstream media because they're forbidden to give it to you. And for a number of reasons. If you see some of our past shows, you'll hear a little bit about that. So I'm going to get right to it. So Richie, I know, wants to say a little bit about Jerry DeLamus and National Liberty Alliance. So Richie, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to mention Jerry DeLamus. I want to ask people to please donate money to him and Sue. He's been a political prisoner for over 5 months now. He could use the financial help. It's a real burden on him and his wife. So if you can donate money, you see it in your heart, please send it to freejerrydelemus.com, and that's JERRYDELEMUS, freejerrydelemus.com. A few other things. Myself and Dean have stepped down as state coordinators for the National Liberty Alliance, but in no way have we abandoned them, because we believe that the National Liberty Alliance has the peaceful and lawful solution to America's problems. And that's the reinstatement of the common law grand jury, which was founded or set up to root out corruption in government. So we're sticking with it. It's just that we can't be, or at least I can't be, and for the most part, the lead state coordinator with the campaign coming up that I have to running for sheriff. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing is we changed our email address. If anybody sent in an email in the last couple weeks, you might want to resend it to the email on the screen right now. It's a new one. We will have that. We won't have any issues with it, so there won't be any problems. So please send it there. And other than that, I said that we wanted to talk about education today, and I'm going to mention a few things, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill McNally to discuss a different viewpoint. But education is everything to me, and education to me now, I wish I could say this when I was in high school, but to me now, education is what's going to save this country. And I say that because the Constitution, knowing the Constitution and knowing how to fight for it, will help all of us Americans, not Democrats, not Republicans, not conservatives, not liberals, but Americans. If you care about your country, center yourself around the Constitution and then fight for it. Fight for your rights under the Bill of Rights. Don't let the government take them from you, because they're not authorized to do that unless you let them go. So I'm asking you to please stick with it. The education of the Constitution is important. You can go to Chris Ann Hall is coming on September 7th and 8th. Dean has arranged for us to come. Bill graciously set up a hall today in Nashua. We have another one in Goffstown. Let me see. There's Publius Hulda is another one you want to watch on YouTube. Michael Badnarik is another one. Carl Miller. There are a lot of people out there that you can sit. If you don't want to read, some people don't like reading, sit and watch a documentary on these people. Michael Badnarik has an 8-hour class that's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And that's Badnarik. The other thing I wanted to mention is actually a couple things, but I'm trying to be brief, is that education, like the heroin problem in the state of New Hampshire is obviously pretty severe in the country, but New Hampshire particularly. 420 deaths last year. And about 6, 7, 8 months ago, at least from what I heard on the news, I haven't followed up on this, the state said we're going to assign a new court to these problems. And then within the past month, they came up with $1.5 million to hire more police, neither of which are going to do anything for the heroin problem in the state. Education at the young age is what we need for these children, so that they understand that when they put a substance into their body, what happens? It goes into the bloodstream, it gets into the brain, they do funny things. But that's not taught in the school system. It needs to be taught. Education is what we should be stressing. Not more benefits for the teachers, not more money for the teachers, just a better education for our children. And if in doing so it means more money for the teachers and more benefits, then great. But not, I can't even get in touch with the NEA of New Hampshire, that little communist organization that doesn't give a damn about our kids. I do give a damn. And I want to see education taught to these children. They deserve a better chance than what we're getting now. And for those of you who might not know anything's going on, I feel bad for you because there's serious problems in this country. You can look and you can find them to this show, a lot of other shows, but I'll say that for now. Education is key, and that's one of the reasons Mr. McNally came on here today, is because I fancy him an expert in education, so to speak. He might not think so, but I think so. And I'd like to turn it over to him so he can talk about his viewpoints. Bill?
Okay.
Turn it over to
Well,
you.
thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
Short notice, too.
You know, as Richie just said, education is the key. However, what is the real key? The real key is literacy, and that's why I'm here. I'm the president of the Samuel L. Blumenfeld Literacy Foundation, which is based in Windham, New Hampshire, and I'm trying to promote the legacy of literacy after the passing away of Sam Blumenfeld in 2015, June 1st, on his 90th day on this earth. So what I'd like to do with the educators and the parents is kind of explain how one does become illiterate in a system that doesn't teach you the proper way to read. And so I have this treatise here, which is 13 pages, that I can get you free as a download if you're interested in reading the entire story. I'm just going to go through some excerpts, but I want to take you back to the 1830s to explain how this dumbing down of America occurred. And it was really by a very nice gentleman. His name was Reverend Gallaudet. He was it's the Reverend Thomas H. Gallaudet, and he was the director of the American Asylum at Hartford for the education of the deaf and dumb. So as we know, at the asylum, of course, a person who's can't hear has to see pictures of words. So that's how he basically started off. And when he developed these words, pictures of a horse, let's say, with the word H-O-R-S-E under it, and camel, C-A-M-E-L, et cetera, he said, well, gee, why can't I do this to the normal children? Because at that time, we didn't have the expertise that we have today. We didn't have brain scans, et cetera, So I want to tell you how he got his program into the Boston schools. It was approximately 1830, and he wrote a book called The Mother's Primer. And in 1837, this primer was adopted by the Boston Primary School Committee, of which Horace Mann was the then secretary of the Board of Education of Massachusetts. Now we have to think of Boston at that time. They didn't have an NEA. They didn't have unions. They had a group called the Boston Schoolmasters, and they controlled pretty much like a board of education. So they introduced this Gallaudet's Mother's Primer, which was whole words with pictures of animals or things and with the letters underneath them. And so by 1844, the entire Boston school system was dysfunctional. They were, in total disarray. The kids couldn't learn to read, and I'm going to explain what happens to a child when he is ready to learn to read and how he develops, so that at least you'll understand it. And of course, a lot of the things I'm skimming over here, so this 13-page article, if you could bring up that one with Don Potter on there, I would like to show the people how they can get to it. At the Don Potter net, are they seeing it on?
Not yet. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Here we go. They got it.
Oh, they got it. So at the donpotter.net, you'll see the Samuel L. Blumenfeld Clinic. I just want you to go there and then just scroll down or search for dyslexia, and you're going to see an article called, "Can Dyslexia Be Artificially Induced in the School?" Yes, says researcher Edward Miller. And that's going to give you the entire detail. So that's a great download. My friend Don Potter teaches Spanish and English in Odessa, Texas. And he's sort of like a consultant to the Blumenfeld Foundation. He's a very good friend of the late Samuel Blumenfeld, and he's a great guy. So getting back to when the Boston schoolmasters then finally said, well, look at this is this whole word look say method that we've introduced to the children. It's destroyed their capacity to read. Let me explain how you destroy a child's brain. And this is how it goes. Here is my right lobe of the brain, and the right lobe sees pictures, arts. The left lobe is concentrating on sound. Now we call these cognitive reflex. So the left brain would have a sound reflex. The right brain would have a sight reflex. If these two cognitive reflexes are in sync, we're not going to have a problem. So if the child starts off with the proper intensive alpha phonics, no whole words whatsoever, and I want to show you the book that the Blumenfeld Foundation publishes. It's called Phonics for Success. We could also bring that up on the, it's only $9.95, and it is a direct replacement of this spiral-bound book, which was Blumenfeld's original book. In this original book, it sells for $25 to $35 on the internet. This book is only sold in Windham, New Hampshire, by the Samuel L. Blumenfeld Literacy Foundation, and it comes with a bonus CD. That bonus CD is called Dumbing Down of America and Common Core, featuring Sam Blumenfeld being introduced by Hal Shurtleff and myself as the videographer. And it is so beautiful. He's going to explain this trivia question that I'm going to ask. What Vice President of the United States was a functional illiterate? One heartbeat from the presidency, and he is a functional illiterate. Well, I'm not sure. In the Dumbing Down, Sam explains how this vice president, let me answer that question. Maybe Rich or Dean will ask me the question just before the end of the show, so we'll know who it is.
Okay.
But we don't want to let the viewers in on it right away.
First thing that came to mind was Obama, but that's not it.
Okay, so now I want you to notice how many pictures are in this book. You know, look at it. 0. This book here is an exact duplicate of this book. Okay. Now, if we could bring up that How to Tutor, Dean. One of my friends in Pennsylvania, Mark Affleck, developed this site called How to Tutor. And on this site, you can get the entire 128 lessons in a variety of formats. One format would be with Sam Blumenfeld teaching on video, which was...
Is that this site?
Yeah, that site
Yeah.
right there. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you'd go How to Tutor, and we won't go through it because it gets kind of difficult, but you know, you can contact me in Windham via email. I'll leave you my email, and I'll explain how you go through that site. You can also get this same download there at that site. So let's go back, continue on with the child's brain. Okay, we said that the child, if he looks at the letter C, he wants to see the letter C with the right brain, and then the left brain says, oh, that stands for K, K. Then when he sees the A, he wants to see the letter A, and then his left brain wants to notice the sound A, and then T for T. So K, A, T, K, A, T, cat. Beautiful, you've got it. Now, if you go back to putting a picture of a cat and then CAT on there, well, how does the child recognize where are the phonetics here? They're not there. Any teacher who says, well, we mix whole words within, and we do teach phonics, believe me, you better be leery, because I'm going to, if in due time, I'm going to start off with how this process was thrown. I just mentioned it was thrown out of the Boston schools in 1844. Well, then what happened to it? Well, when the progressive found out that this could be used to dumb down America, they brought it back in. Now, Sam Blumenfeld himself was in the New York schools in the 1930s. However, they didn't have the money then to throw out phonics and bring in Dick and Jane. And here's a book that Sam wrote. It's called The Victims of Dick and Jane. You remember those books?
Oh,
See
yeah, I
Spot,
have it. Yeah.
See Spot Run.
Yeah.
Ho, 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 See Spot Run.
Yeah.
It's full of pictures, and his masterpiece on the victims of Dick and Jane is very well worth reading. So we go through these phonics. Now, if we will not get a conflict with the child when he learns his ABCs and then the sounds. He is going to come around slower than a whole word student. The whole word student is going to memorize 50 or 60 words right away, and it's going to sound like he's doing good. However, in the age of, let's say, 8, maybe 9 or somewhere, well, what are we going to use if we show a picture of, say, induced or artificial? What kind of a picture will we put if we put the word artificial down and try to put a word under it? As you can see, that's not going to happen. Now, the child comes to school with approximately 5,000 word vocabulary, somewhere in that neighborhood. And guess what? This child didn't go to school to learn how to pronounce all those words. He didn't go to college. He learned it on his own. So when he comes to school, we want him to progress. And if he reaches this brick wall of, as I said about dyslexia, it's going to be a problem, and he could get stuck in this mode. Now, here's how Sam Blumenfeld uncovered this whole problem. In 1955, we have this book here called, by Dr. Rudolph Flesch, called Why Johnny Can't Read. And here's where Sam Blumenfeld, when he read this book, Sam was invited to participate in the Reading Foundation. He says, well, what do you want me to do for the Reading Foundation? He says, and the director says, well, we'd like to get phonics back in the schools. He said, what do you mean? When was it taken out? And so now Sam realized, wow, this is something. So he started doing his research, and Sam came up with this, the Gallaudet method that was probably found by the progressives later and used. Now, this is 1955, okay? Now, let's look at this book right here. This book here is named Why Johnny Still Can't Read, and it's 25 years later, 20 years later. I mean, now, there was a professor of English at Harvard University by the name of Jean Charles. She agreed with this problem, with this reading problem, using whole words, and said that throwing phonics out was a really big mistake, and it's such a shame. But she wasn't quite chastised because she had tenure. But the way you treat someone who wants to tell the truth is you ignore them. So that's what took place in that era. And then Sam Blumenfeld wrote this book, NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education. And he told me, he says, Bill, I was expecting to get a lawsuit from the NEA, but he says when they read the book, they saw that I used all their words, quotes from the NEA. And so they couldn't, there's nothing they could do if he's quoting them. And then along came, just recently in 2000, I believe in 15 or 2014, Sam Blumenfeld got together with Alex Newman and wrote this book called Crimes of the Educators. You have that up there?
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, there's something very important in this book. Not only will he go through in this whole book lots of the things that I was talking about and so much more that a parent can learn, but in the back of the book is an Appendix B, okay? The title of it is John Dewey's Plan to Dumb Down America. Now, John Dewey says that teaching children to read is a fetish. That's why he called this the primary education fetish, and he spells it F-E-T-I-C-H. That's how John Dewey spelled it. And so he's saying that teaching people to read, this is a fetish. We've got to get away from that. So as what Richie was saying, we need to educate. Well, we've got to remember one thing. We've got to be literate if we're going to learn to read and expect children to read books, history books, and things of that nature, and books like this here, which someday I'd like to come back and talk about the Marlowe-Shakespeare connection written by Sam Blumenfeld. It's an excellent story. And, of course, this book here, The New Illiterates, explains the literacy problem in America, as I'm spelling out here with just this short paper, you know. And then, of course, Dean put up on the screen How to Tutor. This is the how you can teach the 3 R's to your child and have him go to school, and don't let the teachers buffalo you and say, listen, well, we teach them this way. If you read these papers, you're going to find out exactly what the problem is. And earlier I mentioned, I was going to mention Dr. Seuss. Now, Dr. Seuss, let me read something about Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss was giving 223 words. They wanted him to write a book, and he said he worked on it for such a long time. He finally came up with a book called The Cat in the Hat, all right? And he says, I did it for a textbook house, and they sent me a word list. And he says, it was due to the Dewey Revolt in the 20s, in which they threw out phonic reading and went to word recognition. And that's what Dr. Seuss did in that book, Cat in the Hat. He says that was due to the revolt, and it says word recognition is reading as if a Chinese pictograph is there instead of blending sounds of different letters. I think killing phonics was one of the greatest causes of illiteracy in the country. And that's true because, as we mentioned earlier, in 1955, Rudolf Flesch explained that in his book, Why Johnny Can't Read, and then later, Why Johnny Still Can't Read. And so we're at this dilemma. The Samuel Blumenfeld Literacy Foundation will give anybody this book if you want to teach your children. You can't afford the $9.95. As long as I can, I have the wherewithal, I'll give you the book. On the internet, like I said, that book comes with a DVD, and Sam Blumenfeld goes through that piece about this functionally illiterate. His name, by the way, was Nelson Rockefeller. Now, how did he become a functional illiterate? This is very interesting. His father, John D. Rockefeller, donated $3 million to the I think it was called the Strange School at Columbia University, and he sent 4 of his kids there. I believe that David may have escaped, but Winthrop and Nelson Rockefeller, he would be on stage and he would have papers like this, and he'd say, I'm not going to read from this today. He says, I'll just ad lib, because he told the people, he says, I had a reading problem, but he never told the reason why. It was because his father started that school, the progressives of the whole word at Columbia, then it started branching out and destroying our children in literacy, I don't know if Dean and Richie, you want to pipe in there? And
Well, I was just going to mention that if you don't mind, I was going to mention I was looking at Charlotte Iserby videos, and you can hardly talk about the dumbing down of America without knowing who she is, I think. And but it was interesting to listen to her talk about her being, aghast at what she found out along the way, and being put into positions of influence in the area of education, and finding out that it's a Marxist takeover of our educational system, and it continues on to today. And we are probably last in the industrialized world for education, which is a tragedy for our future and our kids.
Absolutely.
So what has happened is that our country has been internally destroyed, and we are nearing the final outcome of that destruction, but it's been going on for over 100 years, if not 200.
It's interesting that you mentioned Charlotte Iserby. I had her on my show one time in the Nashua, and let me just tell you a little story about it. This book is dedicated to her as one of the people, John Gatto and Charlotte Iserby. Now, Charlotte Iserby was a senior policy advisor in the Reagan administration.
Right.
And some papers came across her desk relative to the Department of Education, and she was the first consummate whistleblower.
Right.
And she was tossed out. She just got a Freedom of Information release relative to Ronald Reagan in this little note that he read to Ed Meese, and he says, Ed, do you think I should talk to this girl, Charlotte, about? And so that was naturally scrapped. I mean, I don't know what they told him, but he certainly didn't talk to Charlotte Isby,
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, she mentioned that Ronald Reagan came in with the idea of scrapping the whole
Yes.
education
yes.
department, which he didn't do, but because the plan was to eliminate the Department of Education, she was put into that position, which previously or otherwise was held by, top educators in the country, president of Harvard or whatever. So it was folks that had accomplished far more than her in education, but they put her in there thinking in terms of this place is going nowhere. You know what I mean?
And-
So she stayed in there night after night, working till 2 a.m., reading all the documents that these Marxist people had brought in to destroy our country and our educational system.
She's a walking encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Believe
She's
me.
amazing.
You ever hear her on the radio? She just goes on. And she has a website, the Deliberate Dumbing Down what is it?
That's the name of her book too, right?
The name of her book.
Yep.
And you get the free download because they boycotted her book.
Yep.
No one would sell it, and so she offers that as a free download. And I have read it, and believe me, it's a blueprint for the takeover of America.
Right.
It's so well organized that I just wish that.
Well, she's rewritten it in a shorter form, which you're right,
And
probably does that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's the long form and the short form, and I think America owes her a lot. She's such a brilliant person that. Too bad we couldn't get her on a team, but she seems to operate, by herself more or less.
Who says we can't?
Yeah.
Maybe we haven't tried hard enough.
Yeah.
Never give up.
Right.
You want to give your email address now, though, because I don't want to run out of time and you don't give it.
Okay, so if you want to talk about these sites and maybe you want to know how to use that, how to tutor along with the phonics for success, my email is mcnallyusa@msn.com. And mention the the TV program here, Inform New Hampshire, and I'll try to help you out with whatever I can do. I have books by Marva Collins. Marva Collins was a black educator in Chicago, and she was just tired of seeing the kids not get a good education. She started her own private school, and she became a success. In fact, one of the books she dedicated to Sam, and I still have it in my archives, that she signed over to Sam. She was quite an educator and one of Sam's favorites,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, we're down to about a minute and a half here, but is there anything else you want to say to people about?
well, all right, let's just say that the phonics program, intensive phonics, is what is necessary for a child to get a grasp on phonics and reading, because once he can pronounce and see the words or see the letters, he can take a word like cat and then mix it with catonically or catastrophe and all these words, because he'll know the sounds and he'll just sort of work through them. Words that he doesn't know, those will be the easy ones he'll remember, or somebody mentions it. It is going to be, the bottom line is intensive alpha phonics. And people, as I say, that tell you, well, we use whole words, but we also use phonics too. I'm sorry to say that is not going to work. But, however, the educators have got control of the system, and the parents have to realize that. So my wish is that you would understand how a child learns to read and see the importance of not generating a cognitive reflex problem in his brain, or else that will lead to dyslexia and learning disabilities and the rest.
Well, I'd just like to thank Bill for being on the show. It's a wealth of information. Check him out. He's got gave you his email address. Thank you, Bill.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thanks for coming in such a short notice. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll be here next week, so please tune in. Have a great day.
Dan Itzy is next week.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.